Thank you for being here, John.
You're welcome.
Let me start by asking you, I have so many questions about this movie, but there's so much that I'm sure is going to be unanswered. Where did this all start? How did you get access to the story?
Before I answer the question, I recognize a couple of people here, particularly Marianne Rosenberg, who encouraged me to do this film a number of years ago, and she is the granddaughter of the famous art dealer Paul Rosenberg, who obviously is mentioned in the film, and Marianne is interviewed, as many of you saw. Is David Milch here, by the way? No. What about Barry Sporer? Would he stand up, please, where he is? Way in the back. Okay, because he was one of the supporters of the film. I don't know if I've missed anybody else whom I should thank who's here, but we had a lot of help to make this.
Thank you. And yes, clearly this was a great effort. How did it start for you? Where did this all come from?
I've devoted about 40 years of my professional life to writing about the Holocaust, making films about the Holocaust. I was very influenced by Elie Wiesel, whom I interviewed at length for the Paris Review a number of years ago. And I believe that we are witnesses to a stage of the Holocaust that is rapidly disappearing, which are the survivors, and who are the survivors and their families. And I think it's incumbent upon many of us to record what we know, what we witnessed, what we've learned, so that this is etched in the memory of future generations. I mean, the obviously cliche is never forget, but I think it means more than never forgetting. I think it means understanding and trying to understand and not letting this happen again in any way.
So how did this story come your way?
Originally, I was interested in making a film about families who were trying to recover their lost art, restitution, but a lot had been done. And I happened to go to a conference at Columbia University on restitution where Jonathan Petropoulos was speaking. And he talked a little bit about the stolen art. And I said, this is what we really should focus on. And he then told me that he had been in touch with Bruno Losa, and nobody had really documented what a perpetrator, not only an art thief, but other Nazi perpetrators had done for many years after the war. And we had access to this information. I said, this is a great story because it goes beyond art alone. It shows what Germany and numerous other countries did for decades after the war because of the Cold War, because of just the desire to move on historically. People like Losa were able to live very successful lives and productive lives.
So you have this amazing story on your hands. What was the research process? Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because, I mean, you can't believe anything that anyone tells you after I've seen this film. That's what I've learned.
We filmed in 7 countries for almost 10 years. And we spoke, obviously, to a number of people. And, yeah, the truth is elusive. When is somebody lying? How do you know that person is lying? So we constantly had to back up what we were learning with documentation. And I think that's why the Rousseau story is so important, because we have the documentation. We wish we had more documentation because Losa sold a number of paintings to major museums in the United States and Canada. And it's very difficult to trace the history of these paintings because he used cutouts and middlemen, etc.
So this story obviously needs to get out there. How is this? What's the plans for this film? How is this story going to get to everyone who needs to hear this?
We're going to be on PBS on the 19th and 26th of February in prime time. Those are Wednesday nights. We were just in Doc NYC. We're going to be at the Atlanta Jewish Film Festival. in about 10 days or so. We're also going to be in France and Germany on Arte, which will be sometime in the spring. And there'll be a number of other festivals that we expect to be in.
So I want to give time for people to be able to ask questions from the
Sure,
audience.
please.
But let me just ask you one last question. You had mentioned a little bit about how important it is to never forget. But why is this story right now important to our community?
First of all, it's an aspect of the restitution struggle that no one has documented before. It's also a time when restitution is changing, that some countries are still reluctant to give back their art. Other countries have been more forthcoming. Recently, Germany opened up some regulations, government regulations, that made it easier to restitute art. But you then have all of Russia. You have Poland that is resisting. And there was a recent case in Spain, for example, at a museum where the museum refused to give back its painting. So a number of legal cases are continuing, and a number of families are suffering, and in the process, these families are slowly dying out. So it's a question of trying to seize the moment before it disappears.
Thank you. We'd love to take some questions from the audience. We have a microphone here, and
Marianne?
she's going to pass it first with this woman over here.
You did an amazing job. Have you or anyone that you worked with been in touch or have interviewed Ronald Lauder, Estee Lauder's son, who I know is also very involved in this?
Yes, we have.
Can you talk a little about that?
He has been very forthcoming and cooperative.
That's all we're getting?
He's a very private person, so I really can't elaborate, but I can just say that he has been cooperative. I know that, yes. But I admire what he's done, and I respect very much his efforts at the whole restitution issue.
We have a question right here in the middle.
Hi, John. In terms of how the story started, I just want to recall that I got a call from you one day and said, could you meet very briefly to give me some idea about looted art? And we met in an incredibly ritzy diner and to have a quick coffee. And 3.5 hours later, we were still there. I also want to mention that I am indeed Paul Rosenberg's granddaughter. The quest to recover the looted art has started from at the end of the war, and it is still ongoing. We still have 62 pieces of art to recover, and it is a very difficult process. As you mentioned, some locations are more quote-unquote forthcoming, and some are just dead in the water and refuse.
Thank you for being here.
Also, I just want to thank our director, Hugo McGregor, who is currently, he would have been here, but he's currently finishing a film with Simon Schama. And Hugo took 200 hours of footage that we had. It's a very complicated story. We had to leave out certain parts of the Losa story, as a matter of fact. But I think what he did was an amazing job.
Indeed. We're going to take a question over here.
How come originally he could not leave the airport when he came to the U.S., but later on was allowed? And who funds the restitution efforts? And lastly, what's the ritzy diner?
Okay, I didn't hear the last part of the question.
She wants to know more about the diner that...
Oh. You have to ask Marianne about that. He was not allowed in the airport because he was on a watch list. He was a Nazi SS officer, obviously, and after the war, even though that period of history has been generally ignored, the immediate decades after the war, Losa was forbidden to come to this country. Later on, he was allowed to come in, but what he did was he would stop briefly at the airport, and then in 1 or 2 trips, he went to Canada. Does that answer your question?
How come they let him
Because he was no longer on the watch list. I mean, things had changed.
The NYPD had a art recovery unit for many years, started by, I think his name was Robert Volpe. He had a book called the Art Cop. I was wondering if you ever crossed paths with him, or because obviously they should have that in every major city or whatever. I don't know if it would be helpful to you, but it did, and they recovered stolen art.
I don't know him, and I didn't have any contact with him, but I'm glad to know about that.
I got some questions up there.
Thanks again for an amazing film. In the film, there was the comment, maybe joking, maybe not, that if you want to have a crime against humanity, to basically plunder. That's pretty ominous in this world these days. What's being done, to your knowledge, to help make sure that never again extends to this? Are there new laws, to your knowledge, or is there international cooperation? 50 years from now, will your grandson or granddaughter be doing another movie?
All right, you pack a lot into that question. I think what we're seeing today is that greed dominates. It dominated then, it dominates now. And how to prevent what happened then, now, I don't think that's possible, really. I wanted to mention, though, that it wasn't just for the art that the Nazis were stealing these paintings and other objets d'art, but it was part of eradicating Jewish culture from Europe. And it was part of the decimation of the genocide of the Jews. They wanted to wipe out all traces of Judaism. And the art was just one part of that.
We're going to take the last two questions, one here, and then we have one there.
Well, first of all, I thought there was an amazing filmmaking. Really kept me on the edge of my seat because the story kept unfolding and it was really very well done. I also wanted to, I know you had several people in the film which I think deserve a lot of credit because they were the early pioneers and all that. That's Lynn Nicholas and Hector Feliciano, who very early on, started breaking the stories and doing the research into the archives. And I think they need an additional bit of kudos. But it's also important to say that it wasn't just about plunder of art, as you said, but ended up, because a lot of people don't think about it that way, just think people just stole, pictures, and they're upset that the heirs, when they recover it, occasionally have to sell it, and they see it as sort of not such a nice thing. But it's really about the murder of people in order to get the collection, as you so illustrated so well with those two families, and the Goodmans and the Fishers.
Yeah, one reason why their families are so eager to get their art back, they've been criticized because others say, well, they just want the money. But it really is, in most cases, a quest for memory. It's a quest for the past, for their childhood memories, for their lost families. It's the only link they really have to the past. And it's painful to see the difficulties that they have to endure to try to get this little remnant of their past lives. By the way, the snow is just beginning. It's just, so I see some.
It's still safe, but we did have one more question over here.
Oh,
No,
sorry,
we need it
for
because it's
ADA
being
compliance.
recorded too.
Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah.
I just wanted to acknowledge an extremely interesting documentary, and since Jonathan Petropoulos couldn't be here, I just wanted to also, if people are interested, he's written an entire book on Bernard Losa, which he spent, as you can see from the movie, many, many years researching. So
Yeah,
it's an entire book on the subject.
Thank you for mentioning that. Obviously, we never could have done the film without Jonathan. he was the star, but he was also our research source. And yes, he wrote a book a couple of years ago called Goring's Man in Paris, which is the story of Losa. And he includes much more, obviously, than we were able to include in the film. So I recommend the book, absolutely.
John, any other takeaways before we finish?
I wanted to thank you all for coming, and I hope this stays in your memory. And if you have an opportunity to restitute, or you know people who do have paintings that they'd like to get back, or any object of value, or value of memory particularly, try to help them. And help any of the families. And again, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.